And let me get my video back on, sorry. All right, cool. There I am. So we are going to, our team is going to share with you who we are, what we're about at Georgia Tech Ventures Lab today. And we will be happy to take questions as we're going through material today in the chat. And if time allows, we'll do a Q&A at the end as well if people want to come off mute and ask some questions. Okay, so give me 1 second and I will start sharing my presentation. On a side note, I know that Jacqueline Strickland with GEM is the one that sent this up. She unfortunately had a family emergency, so she won't be joining us today. But you are going to be joined by our illustrious team instead. So let's go ahead and jump in. And so let me actually start off this conversation real quick with a background on our connection to Jacqueline. So at Georgia Tech's VentureLab, and I'll get into all of this, we run a program called I-Core from the National Science Foundation. And we are looking for ways to interact with and engage with the GEM fellows here on campus and graduate students generally. But we are looking for ways that we can interact with GEM students on campus through the I-Core initiative. So that was the impetus for us coming along and introducing you guys to VentureLab. And we're definitely very excited to share with you all the information related to what we do. So I'm going to get started really quickly with an introduction to our team, and I'll just go ahead and start with myself. Oh yeah, one more thing, guys. It's a small group here, and we're very friendly. So if you guys are comfortable, we definitely encourage y'all to turn on your videos. We'd love to see your faces this morning. So if it's a possibility for you, please feel free to do that. Okay, so here is our team from Georgia Tech's VentureLab that is here today. My name is Sarah Martin Henderson, and I have been here at Georgia Tech now for 2 years, working with VentureLab and teaching entrepreneurial teams about the lean startup methodology for the past couple of years. And I'm excited to share some of who we are and what we're about with you all today, and to just provide you with opportunities to understand what our programs are and how you might engage with us. I will pass it off to Leah. Leah, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, can you all hear me?
Yep.
All right. Switching to a new computer, so apologies if the video isn't on right now. But anyway, thank you, Sarah. Thank you, team. My name is Leah. I am VentureLab's Educational Outreach Coordinator.
I think we lost you, Leah. Well, I'll go ahead and finish introducing Leah. Leah's been with us for a little over a year now. She's our outreach coordinator. She helps us to organize and promote our programs around campus and around the Southeast and really anywhere that we have a footprint. And she was prior to joining us at VentureLab, she was with the Language Institute for many years, helping international students get acclimated to Georgia Tech and being in the States, and then reversed to, helped with some Language Institute programs that were international as well. So we're very excited to have Leah on our team and here today. Melissa, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Melissa Hefner. I've been with VentureLab for since 2014, so 7 years now, teaching the Lean Startup methodology on Georgia Tech's campus. In fact, I think we have a former student on the call, Leah, Joelle from our Tech Ventures class. I think I'm remembering that correctly. If so, it's good to see you again, Joelle, and welcome. So teach this Lean Startup methodology, not just on campus, but regionally, nationally as an adjunct I-Core instructor with the I-Core Teams program. And we also take this on the road and teach it internationally as well. We've been in Puerto Rico for a number of years, have a relationship with Science Foundation Ireland, so teach it to research faculty over in Ireland, host German Fulbright students, well, until COVID, yearly. So we have a wide range of students that we teach this to and faculty. We also have run programs in the public health sector with CDC and with some entrepreneurship, if you will, with industry and corporations. So anyway, glad to see you all this morning and excited to share with you what this methodology is and how we use it. Glad you're here.
Keith, you're up. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Keith McGregor here. I'm the director of VentureLab and the lead instructor for the I-Core South node. I'm one of 9 in the U.S. and teach this methodology really all over the place, just like Melissa said. Very, very excited to be here with you, and I want you to know that the things that you hear about in this workshop are the things we practice through and through in VentureLab and at the National Science Foundation and National Institutes of Health and various other government agencies and 3-letter agencies and all of that. So we're excited to have you in this workshop this morning. Welcome.
Thank you, Keith, and thank you, team. Keith and Leah are gonna drop off now because we are, as you will see here in a little bit when I explain what we do, we are all very engaged with a number of different programs, so they are off to go participate in some other activities. But Melissa and I are very excited to continue the conversation with you and tell you more about VentureLab and what we do and how you guys can engage. So let's get started. So as I've said a number of times, we're from Georgia Tech VentureLab. And our mission or our goal here is really to help identify potential commercialization concepts, ideas, projects, and to really bring them out of the lab, bring them out of the campus and into the real world, into the market. To really develop not just the product or the service or the idea or concept, but to develop the entrepreneurs and the inventors. So that's you guys, right? So we're here. I will share some other resources and members of the commercialization and entrepreneurship ecosystem here at Georgia Tech in a little while. But we are one of the players and here to support you guys in any kind of initiative or idea that you might have or research that you want to take a little bit further and to really help you understand how you can go about doing that. Our team at VentureLab is pretty small and scrappy. We're made up of about, I think it's 10 people at this moment, and we're split in half. We've got an educate side of our team and a create side of our team, and I'll go through what that means real quickly. So on the educate side, you have myself and Melissa and Leah, who just introduced herself as well, and our side of VentureLab is really dedicated to running programs, teaching budding entrepreneurs about the lean startup methodology as a mechanism or a way to frame up their startups, their concepts, their inventions, and how to figure out how to commercialize those things and bring them out into the marketplace. And so our whole reason for being is to educate individuals and really help them kick off that journey and begin to understand about the application that their research or their technology could actually have in the marketplace, and to leverage things like customer discovery and market research to really begin to determine where your ideas fit in the real world and how they can have the biggest impact. And so we do teach here at Georgia Tech. We also teach and run programs and provide support to audiences across the South, nationally and internationally as well. And we'll get into that in just a bit. So of the many different activities that we do, a day in the life of Melissa, myself, and Leah, like I said, really revolves around developing, promoting, and teaching these types of programs. They're similar in format to what you might think of when you think of a startup accelerator, but there are some key differences that we'll get into here in a little bit. But we spend the vast majority of our time developing those programs. We also teach lean startup methodology through courses on campus. We have a whole lot of one-on-one coaching sessions with teams that we engage with just to really get researchers started down this path. So the other side of our house is what we call the create team. And these individuals really kind of help us extend the support that we kick off. So our educate team is here to really begin the journey for many of our researchers down the path of entrepreneurship, and our create team really helps to extend that journey. They will take teams after they go through one of our programs and take them further down the process of becoming an entrepreneur and actually starting a business. They're here to really help with finding additional funding to continue to expand your research towards the market application. They do a lot with the Georgia Research Alliance funding. They will have a lot more one-on-one coaching sessions with teams, help teams really begin to seek out and find other team members or mentors. They will help teams with, defending their idea and pitching their idea and finding other programs that they can plug into to really extend their entrepreneurial experience. So here's a little high-level view on how we approach at VentureLab, how we approach and think about, and at Georgia Tech, how we approach and think about this idea of commercialization. And our team specifically focuses on commercialization through startups, through entrepreneurship, but we are really connected in with other groups on campus like the Office of Technology Licensing for thinking about other avenues towards commercialization. So perhaps it's not a startup. It might be that you end up licensing aspects of your research out to a company in industry. And so this is kind of a high level flow of how we think about your journey to commercializing your research or commercializing your idea. It really starts with this idea of curation. It really starts with us scanning what's out there. So we look at a lot of the research papers, we look at a lot of what's going on in the various labs around campus, and begin to figure out who is ready for this type of engagement. And then we do quite a lot of around education, right? The first kind of step that we do with many of our customers is going to be education. And then we get into this idea of the create side of VentureLab, and really extending that journey past the bubbles here in the center, right? You've got CD, which stands for customer discovery. CV is customer validation, CC is customer creation, and G is really getting things off the ground and running. And so what we do is we educate and then bring teams further along their journey. There's also the group on campus ATDC, which really helps with some of that tail end work with getting a startup going. And then, like I said, we connect in with the licensing group as well, if that's the right path for your research and your technology towards the market. So at VentureLab, so we've been in existence for quite a while, but there was a fundamental shift in how we operated in adopting lean startup methodology, which I'll get into in much more detail. But since 2011, when that shift occurred, we have had a number of over 300 companies created. We look at and review roughly between 2011 and now, we've looked at roughly 500 concepts per year. And just today alone, we have over 400 active startup teams that we're engaging with at some point of the process. Since 2011, our teams that we have coached at some point have had a total number of investments that have reached over $3 billion, which for a team of 10, we feel very accomplished with that. And that can be anything from grant funding to private investment. But many of our startup teams that decide to go the distance with their concepts and their ideas are really able to receive that kind of funding and that success. So again, like I said, we have over 400 active startups that we're engaging with as of today, and all in various stages of this process. I want to talk to you a little bit more about, so now that I've kind of shared with you about who we are as Georgia Tech's VentureLab, I want to talk to you a little bit about how the lean startup methodology has come into play with who we are. So again, we talk about what I'm going to share with you today, and what we talk about a lot is this idea of customer discovery and this idea of customer creation for your startup. And we actually take that very seriously for our own team as well. And so our most important factor about who we are is really who we serve. And you guys are really who we serve. We serve teams coming out of Georgia Tech teams across the South, in some instances, teams nationally, and then teams internationally with key international partners as well. And while we mostly focus at Georgia Tech, for example, while we mostly are going to focus on graduate, postdocs, PhDs, and faculty, we do also do quite a lot of coaching with undergraduate startup teams and also community teams that are coming to us through the Atlanta Innovation and Entrepreneurship ecosystem. So what is Lean Startup? So Lean Startup is really, it's an approach to business creation, to business model generation, an approach to developing a startup that really tries to mimic a scientific approach in that you're making some best guesses about why you think your research and where you think your research belongs in the marketplace and belongs in industry, and how you think you're going to take what it is you're creating and actually get it out into the real world for real world impact. And we start with some best guesses and we go ahead and we test that out with our customers, right? We want to figure out the fastest way to go from these best guesses about where your invention belongs and making sure that those best guesses are in fact valid and getting that company spun up around that idea. So Lean Startup really started with a guy named Steve Blank out in California. He teaches and coaches Lean Startup to many different startup teams, but he is the one that really kind of birthed this idea of Lean Startup. He was engaging with a large number of entrepreneurs and really realized that a lot of his startup teams struggled to focus on what was really important to getting their business going. Many of them were engineers by nature or inventors by nature and wanted to just build and didn't take the time to actually determine if what they were building was going to be important to anybody. And so what he wanted to do was to develop a methodology that budding entrepreneurs could follow to ensure that the thing that they were creating was actually going to have a place in reality, in the real world. So he came up with this customer development methodology and this idea that you would go out and actually try to make a best guess about who you think your ultimate customer is going to be for the thing that you are creating, and then go out and have these conversations with those people early before you even start to necessarily get too heavy into the building of your solution or your startup, and begin to determine if what you think to be what you believe their problem is, because you're building some sort of a solution. So what you believe their problem is in fact a real problem for them, and one that they really want to solve, one that is big enough for them that they're going to be seeking a solution. So it's all about this process of going out, making those guesses about who the customer is, why they should care about your solution, and validating those guesses, figuring out through the actual in-person conversations, determining whether or not what you think is true is actually true. And through that process, we get to a place where we're validating that customer segment and then eventually creating customers. So you then get to a place where you're actually able to, you've already done sort of the legwork to determine who you're going to sell to, and you've already determined that they're likely going to want to buy what you're creating. As when you get to this place of customer creation, you've done quite a lot of that legwork already. And then eventually you get to a place where you're building the company out. Another key founder, I would say, of the Lean Startup methodology as it exists today is this guy, Alex Osterwalder, and he is a part of a consultancy from Boston called Strategizer. And Alex came in with this idea of creating a new framework that really helps startups to conceptualize what they need to consider to get their business off the ground. And so this is the business model canvas. It's a key component of the programs that we run out of VentureLab. We work on getting teams to understand who their customer segment is. We get teams to understand why their customer segment cares. So that's the value proposition. And then we go through with teams on these other on the rest of these 9 boxes to really begin to conceptualize how their businesses ought to work. So this particular startup methodology is different for a couple key reasons. The first one is that a traditional approach to creating something new or creating a new business is that we focus on Can I build it, and is it going to be profitable, right? And there's a lot of times when you start with those two components, like we just start by building the thing and we just want to know that it's feasible to build it. Does the technology exist that we can actually make this thing a reality? And then we want to quickly figure out, is it going to make us money? Because we need to go tell investors that it's going to make them money. And so there's a whole lot of forecasting and predicting going on about whether or not it's going to be a viable business that often isn't baked in any kind of evidence or really thorough evidence. And so the difference here is that we want to understand the evidence piece of whether or not this is going to be a viable business by understanding if it's desirable. Is there a customer for this particular thing that I'm creating, and are they really going to want this solution? You cannot have a business without a customer. And so the difference with this approach is that it focuses on that desirability piece first. There is so much emphasis throughout this lean startup methodology on the customer, because again, without them, you don't have a business. And we want to make sure that you guys understand who they are and why they care early and often. So part of this methodology is to conduct hundreds of those customer discovery interviews to really validate your solution. You will see this especially in a national program that I'm going to explain to you in just a minute. A lot of our programs only require that we scratch the surface with you, that will help coach you through the first 20 to 40 interviews that you might conduct. But the expectation is, if you are going to follow the lean startup methodology to ensure and de-risk your idea and ensure the success of your invention and your research and your startup, the idea is that you would be conducting hundreds of these customer discovery interviews at the start of your journey. Another big difference in this particular type of like lean startup accelerators is that it's a reverse classroom. So the expectation is that the startup team, the budding entrepreneur or entrepreneurial team, is going to go out and do the hard work to see if they have a real business that could be successful. And that we, as your instructors, would spend the vast majority of our time with you, not necessarily telling you what to do, but coaching you on what you're hearing and learning from the customers. So we would be doing just a lot of coaching on what you're experiencing as the entrepreneur. It's also a very, we spend a lot of time coaching you through the act of questioning, and which is very typical as a startup. You would experience quite a lot of that as you start to get in front of anybody that might be funding you. So whether that's grant funding or investors, you could expect quite a lot of people wanting to understand your startup and wanting to understand the work that you've done to validate it and to ensure that it's going to be successful. They're going to do that through a whole lot of questioning about what you've accomplished, if you have anybody that's bought into it yet, how it's going to work, that sort of stuff. And so we do quite a lot of our coaching through that method as well. There's also this concept of radical candor. And so when Melissa and I are coaching teams through one of our programs, we want to make sure that you're getting the right type of feedback as quickly as possible. And so there's not a whole lot of sugarcoating or hand-holding necessarily, but more we want to give you the best possible feedback as quickly as we can, so that you can be as successful as possible as an entrepreneur. So what does the National Science Foundation have to do with us or any of this? So VentureLab, Georgia Tech's VentureLab, actually wears two hats. So we act as a support mechanism for Georgia Tech and for members of the campus here, but we also act as a host for the National Science Foundation's Innovation Corps, or I-Corps program. And so the National Science Foundation has a mission to actually increase the economic impact of research dollars that they put into research labs. And part of that, as an aspect of that mission, they wanted to create something that they could, where they could ensure that the research that they were investing in was actually reaching the marketplace and making that kind of impact. And so they decided to develop this I-Corps program. And so in order to develop this I-Corps program, they brought in Steve Blank, and they brought in Alex Osterwalder. They wanted to understand the customer creation process, the business model canvas, and lean startup methodology in general, and how they could leverage that towards the creation of this new program. And what this new program does is it's a 7-week startup boot camp style program where teams are expected to reach a minimum of 100 customer discovery interviews over the course of those 7 weeks to begin to validate the business model they're creating, to begin to validate the startup they're creating. During this 7-week program, teams are brought in and taught about lean startup methodology. Then they are coached on their customer discovery activity. And ultimately, the goal here is that we're translating research that teams are coming into this program with into customer-backed or evidence-based innovation that can reach the marketplace. In this national I-Core program, a team is typically structured this way. I'm imagining the vast majority on the call today would fall into this entrepreneurial lead category. And so you're bringing in your PI, you have yourself, the entrepreneurial lead, and then you're seeking out an industry mentor to really help you to recruit and schedule and set up all of those customer discovery interviews. The National Science Foundation's I-Core program is broken out into 9 regional nodes. And so we here at Georgia Tech actually constitute the South region, so the South node. So specifically, Georgia Tech's VentureLab is the NSF I-Core South node. And we work together with members of this node as well as other nodes across the country to really support the idea of getting research teams and research-based startup teams to that national I-Core program. So our South node, our partners are University of Alabama at Birmingham, University of Tennessee, and then we have a number of other universities, research universities across the Southeast that have a different type of program called a SITES program, and they're all intertwined and networked with us. And so we will service teams from across the Southeast. VentureLab, wearing our I-Core South hat, we provide quite a bit of programming. So we provide what are considered regional cohorts across the Southeast that feed into the national cohort. So teams that go through the regional cohort, they do that in order to create eligibility to apply for the national cohorts. There is also our SITES program, which I'll talk about briefly, which provides another mechanism for startup teams to have that eligibility requirement to apply for the national cohort. At the SITES program, teams can conduct or receive a micro grant from us to go conduct 20 to 30 customer discovery interviews. We also do train the trainer programs where we train both instructors and mentors that would engage with I-Core. So again, just as a reminder, our most critical is our who. And like I mentioned before, it goes beyond Georgia Tech, but it really is about the startup teams and then those educators and mentors. We want to make sure that we're helping everybody understand lean startup and how to leverage it to create a business. So at VentureLab as I-Core South, again, we have conducted over the course of our time existing as I-Core South, we have conducted 45 plus programs or cohorts. We've taught and educated over 900 teams, 2,400 entrepreneurs, over 200 instructors, and we've recently started our mentor academy. So we've coached about 50 mentors so far. We're basically the same. We're just kind of wearing 2 hats. So we're fully synced up. So everything that we teach in and for the NSF I-Core program through the lens of lean startup, we are also using those same methodologies, mantras, to provide the support that we provide as Georgia Tech VentureLab. So the Educate team, Melissa, myself, and Leah, we provide lean startup programs, and then the principals, our Create side of our house, they are following the same type of methodology and the same type of thinking, this customer first approach to creating a business. They're following that as they coach teams beyond our education programs. So once again, this is what our lean startup methodology looks like at Georgia Tech. We have also distributed this methodology and helped other organizations and commercialization support teams at Georgia Tech to think in this way. So CreateX very much follows a very similar methodology, as does Engage, as does ADTC, We teach this methodology in actual courses through the EMBA program and through a number of other courses on campus. We also work to bring this type of methodology to help foster innovation for teams that are not necessarily going to spin out startups, but are just looking for new ways to think about innovation and trying to think of new ways to just problem solve. And so we've done this in through a few different projects with GTRI and with Big GT as they're thinking about the culture at Georgia Tech, and then also with the CDC. We also work on, we will help teams and teach teams how to think about this methodology if they are just seeking to improve their understanding and the way that they articulate the impact that their research could make. They might not necessarily want to go and do a startup, but perhaps they want to better understand and better articulate how their research can make an impact. And so we also have programs where we're very focused on that through a quick iteration on the business model canvas known as the mission model canvas. And once again, the lean startup methodology, while it has the word startup in it, it is also just generally a problem solving methodology, an innovation methodology. And we just try to help teams understand how they can think about the way that they solve problems in a slightly different way. So I was going to try to cover customer discovery with you all today, but I think we are getting perhaps a little short on time. So I think I'll go ahead and pass it off to Melissa if you're ready.
Well, I was going to say, why don't you do customer discovery and then I do value prop, and I can just leave out the second part of my lecture because I think the two of those flow better.
Perfect. I will go ahead and do that. Yeah. All right, so let me talk to you about customer discovery. I mean, I've mentioned it a few times. Let me talk to you kind of about what it means. So what it means is to really create the evidence for your startup by learning directly from your potential customer. So you make a best guess about who your customer is, and we want to go out and learn from them. And we don't just do this by going out and talking to them. It really is about actively listening. So we go out and we have these interviews and these conversations, and we want to make sure that the vast majority of the time that we're engaged with a customer to learn more from them, that we're letting them do the talking, right? We want to give them questions, a line of questions that keeps them telling us about who they are. So let's talk about why we think this is a good idea, right? Why do we think it's important to talk to humans? The reality is we just don't want to go build something that nobody wants. So we want to make sure that what we think is the problem, what we believe to be true, is in fact true. And we can't just rely on our own perspective, our own experiences, because it's really just a sample size of one when you're doing that. And we want to go out there and actually make sure that the thing that we're creating is based on real evidence about real people in the real world. What are they experiencing? What do they need? What do they want? They ultimately become the source of truth for whether or not you should go build this startup, build this thing, build this innovation. So we want to make sure that we're really listening to them. Ultimately, again, you don't want to create something that nobody wants, and customers don't necessarily want your solution. They just want to be able to get their jobs done, right? And they don't care if it's through your solution or through a competitor's solution or through some other workaround that they've come up with. It's just whatever is the easiest way for them to get their job done is what they're going to use. So ultimately, we need to figure out how to create that path for them. In Lean Startup, again, like I said, all changes that we would like to see from our startup teams, we want to see that they're backed by this type of evidence. And so they will come, our startup teams come in, and like I said, they make their best guesses on what belongs in these boxes on their business model canvas, and then they use those interviews. That's basically them running those experiments on those hypotheses, on those guesses, to turn their assumptions into actual truth and validated fact. And so we take them through that process and that experimentation. In customer discovery interviewing, there's really a variety of types of interviews. You can have intercept interviews where you're just going out into the public and stopping people on the street, so to speak, or going to a trade show and stopping people there and asking them about what their experience is with a particular job or problem that you think you're going to solve. There's in-depth interviews, which are a little longer, and you're really trying to get to know that customer, get to know their experience in a lot of depth. There's also expert interviews where you might talk to somebody who has a really good bird's eye view of the ecosystem that you're exploring and can give you a lot of insight about who you need to go talk to really understand all the ins and outs. We encourage our teams to go and find their potential stakeholders on LinkedIn. So ideally, they'll potentially, especially if they go to the national program, they would have a mentor to help them do this, or they might be able to leverage their existing network to help them do this. But if they can't, then we would encourage them to go onto LinkedIn and start to seek out. They make a best guess on who their customer is, and then they start to seek out that type of person on LinkedIn and reach out to them and see if they'll talk to them. Like I said, we encourage our teams to also go to things like trade shows and conferences to put themselves in front of as many people that might be in the industry that they're exploring or be in the space that they're interested in creating a solution as possible, so they can get as much information from those intercept style interviews as they can. We also encourage our teams to go to where their customers are. So if they're creating a solution for people traveling or flying through airports, then we might encourage them to go to an airport and start to ask people about their travel experience. So we tell them to go seek out their interviews where the customer actually is. And the benefit of doing that too, it provides them to see the customer in the environment where they're trying to get the job done, and they can do more than just have a conversation. They begin to observe that human behavior to really understand where the problems and the gaps are. So ideally, teams will be conducting the vast majority of their interviews in person. You get a whole lot more from an in-person conversation. But our reality, of course, is that we are living in a new world here post-COVID, where virtual conversation is very typical, and people have become much more comfortable. So we will also encourage teams to do so over video, to have these interviews over video. We do not want our teams to conduct conversations over the phone because they're unable to get that body language, they're unable to get that observation. So we encourage them to not have these interviews over the phone. We also avoid surveys because in surveys you're not able to get the full picture. So you're asking for people in closed-ended questions. You're not giving them an opportunity to elaborate or tell their full story or give you specific scenarios. And so we discourage surveys. In fact, we don't allow surveys in our program at all, but want the evidence that our teams are creating to really be pulled out of deep conversation. Customer discovery activity in our Lean Startup programs is really there to begin to deeply empathize with the customers, seek out the bad news, understand what the pain points are, really read that body language to get to conceptualize what's going on so that you know what to solve. And we encourage what we call the 80-20 rule, where you as the interviewer are speaking 20% of the time and the interviewee is talking 80% of the time. So again, it's all about active listening and then detailed note taking so that you can take what you heard and really make sense of that as you make decisions about what direction your solution or your startup ought to take next. Again, we want our teams to make sure that when they're finishing their customer discovery interviews, that they close up with thanking their interviewee, asking who else they should talk to, and really continuing to build that population of people that they're going to go have conversations with. We don't want people to talk about their technology, their research, or their innovation, or to take feature requests during these conversations. It's all about what the customer is currently experiencing, their current behavior, and what do they currently do? What are their current pains, their current solutions that they're trying to leverage, and really finding a place for your invention and your research to exist in that process. We encourage so many interviews because it is a learning process, this type of research. You're likely going to burn the first batch of interviews as you get used to holding this kind of conversation. It's really easy to kind of treat it like a verbal survey. It's easy to do all the talking. And so just getting into that habit of active listening. So we want to encourage you to do a large number of interviews to really seek out that truth. The other reason for so many interviews is that truth is going to have a lot of different meanings and dimensions. We're going to hear perspectives from many people. We need to make sense of what we're hearing and seek out specific patterns and insights. And the best way to do that is to make sure that we've conducted enough interviews to really begin to validate our assumptions and our guesses. So we like to think about it this way. We try to take teams from these types of phrases, this idea that we think that, I believe that, our team knows that, or it's common knowledge that. So we take teams from saying this about their startup, about their idea, to saying this. We learned, we heard from the customer told us, they said that. We had no idea until we talked to them. So we want to encourage our teams to get to this place where they're communicating about their research and their startup idea through the lens of what they've heard from customers. And I'm going to pass it off to Melissa to kind of take us through the next quick hit on lean startup methodology.
Thanks, Sarah. You all still with us? You can put a thumbs up in the chat or text any questions that you might have. Any questions going on in chat? Juanita, thank you for the thumbs up. Anything else? Anybody confused? Anybody super bored?
So Joelle had a question about Puerto Rico and what we do down there.
Yeah. So Joelle, I'll be happy to catch up with you. I know you have to drop. Puerto Rico, that environment is, though they are very small, they are a small little island, man, they are entrepreneurs at heart. I think it, if I had to guess, it comes from an environment of being a little bit secluded, and so having to sort of be scrappy and do things for yourself. But we started working with Puerto Rico back in 2015, I think, right after I came on board. And every time they run a lean startup program, they are oversubscribed by hundreds of applications. And so, as you can imagine, it's not all deep technology engineering projects. We get a number of those, but it's also just, hey, how do I solve problems and create solutions just for the world in which I live, right? That don't necessarily have a technology focus, but have recognized a problem for a group of people and want to try to iterate to solve it. So we do a lot of work with Mayaguez, and Sarah and I both have been down there a number of times to teach. So anyway, it's a cool program, and the entrepreneurial spirit that is on that island is unlike any I've seen in such a select group of people. So Vanessa, great question. Thank you. What are our thoughts on focus groups? So what we want to do is avoid groupthink. We want to avoid, we want folks to be able to give us as open and honest answers to the questions that we're asking, right? Because we're asking about behavior. We're not asking about process necessarily or functionality. We're asking about behaviors and environments and how their jobs are working for them and why, what problems are they having in a particular situation and why. And with focus groups, we can get into a little bit of the group think. And so we avoid those as well. And this lean startup customer discovery methodology really focuses on you developing a personal connection with customers and having conversations with them that feel more intimate and are one-on-one, so that you really get to dig in and understand your customer base as best you can. Does that make sense? Do you have any follow-up to that? So here's the deal with this methodology. There is a time and a place for writing a business plan. This methodology doesn't do that, right? It uses a tool called the business model canvas. There is a time and a place for surveys. Sarah and I use surveys in our programs, but we know who our customers are, and we know very specifically what questions we need to ask in our surveys to give us some feedback based on how we're going to iterate. We also have to do it because NSF tells us to, right? There is a time and a place for focus groups. I would argue that all of those is not none of those times or those places are when you're developing a startup, right? That comes down the road when you have a business model, you understand what you're iterating on, you know who your customers are, you know really what kind of questions to ask. It's not that you can't do that, but not for this methodology. Does that help, Vanessa? Okay, cool. Any other questions? Thanks for typing those in. All right, so Sarah's talked with you about customer discovery and why it is so critically important for startups to really engage with their customers and figure out what those problems, pain points, and jobs are that they're trying to get done. And we lead off each program with questions about a team's customer segment, and then questions about what the value proposition might be for your customers. So to dig into value propositions, here's a serious question for you. Do you really think that products or solutions exist in the world that have no long-lasting value? Maybe you can think of some. And if you can, type it in the chat. Do you think this really happens? TikTok, says Ray. That's hilarious. There are like probably 40 million teenagers, maybe even teenage girls, who would disagree with you. My daughter being one of them. So yes, this happens. I think it's still to be seen what the way of TikTok goes, right? But we definitely have products, solutions out in the world that ultimately are not going to be universally adopted, solve universal problems, right? That type of thing. It happens. This picture cracks me up. This had to have been invented by parents with more than one child, right? Everything has to be equal and fair. I could have used one of these during COVID. My husband's an extremely loud talker, even when I shut both of the doors that lead into his office space. This is probably what's wrong with many of our children, right? Computer time, screen time, all the time. I found this technology, and I think this is the worst thing that's ever been invented. And I'm not surprised that it never gained traction. It is a set of utensils that somehow, through magic, it seems like, has the capability to register what you are eating, what the amount is, what the caloric intake is, et cetera, and it will track for you what you're eating and tell you when to stop. And I think it's the worst invention ever. But this actually exists. I think you can actually still buy it if you want to. All right, so those are some silly examples, right, of products or solutions that are put out into the market that really don't have any long-lasting value. But what happens is, if we do not understand the customer, if we do not understand the value that we are going to offer to the customer, the motivating reason why they want to engage with us. Think about this. If something is a big enough problem or pain point that someone has, chances are they're doing something about it now, right? They have some kind of solution, some kind of workaround. And so what you want to be able to do is provide the type of value that gets them to quit whatever they're doing now, fire whatever solution they're using now, and engage with you, a no-name startup, right? To begin to build a customer base and gain some traction. So these two boxes on the business model canvas are intimately linked and are the two boxes that are most critical for teams to start to get an understanding of. The customer segments talk about the pain points, the jobs, and the problems someone has, and the value proposition box just talks about how you're going to alleviate that. Alleviate those problems, help a team help a customer have some gains and alleviate the pain. And so we call this the fit, right? When you begin to understand what your customers' issues are and how you might solve for those problems and provide a solution to them, this is where we begin to get a fit. Any idea as to who owns the value proposition? Who will determine what the value proposition is for each customer segment? Any thoughts? You can just type it in the chat, or you can unmute. Oh, I have it on the slide. Dang it. You own the value proposition. You own the value proposition. This is the hard part, right? We want our customers in conversation to be able to tell us, this is what you need to do for me, and this is how you need to provide value, and this is what is going to motivate me to engage with you. Well, unfortunately, they're not going to do that. And actually, if you're asking them questions where they might be able to answer that, you're asking them the wrong questions, because your job is to go in and understand the issues that they're having, and then understand their ecosystem as a whole and innovate for that. So how do we design value propositions? The first thing we do is we consider the customer. So there, Venn diagram for the win, right? There is definitely what any startup begins with, what they think their customer wants, right? It is always their best guess, and oftentimes an educated guess about what you think the customer wants or needs in order to address a problem or a pain point. But what overlaps with that only a little bit is what they really want, right? So we have a lot of ideas about how to solve something for someone, but we're not going to really understand how they like to have value delivered to them until we begin to engage with them and see how they make decisions based on new solutions to try or new technologies to adopt. But there's also this intersection of what can actually be built, right? I mean, I would love a flying car so that when Ponce de Leon Avenue is backed up in the morning, I could turn into some kind of hovercraft. And it's not there yet. My husband's in mobility. Jim, can you get on that?
What's that?
I need a flying car.
You can't have a flying car with automated.
Says I
car
can't.
with your
See?
car.
Can't be built. I don't,
It can be built.
not
It's
helpful.
being built. It's just going to be a waste.
And then there's this intersection of what you as a team can actually build, right? So we're narrowing a little bit what our solution actually needs to look like. But here's where our opportunity sits. This intersection of what you learn they really want and what they really need to solve a problem or a pain point, and what you are actually able to build and what can be built. So a value proposition is an explanation of how you are going to address jobs that they need to get done, alleviate those pain points that they have, and help them get to the next level, right? Perhaps you notice that the people that you want to innovate for, they just need to be more competitive, right? Or they need to get to the next level before their competitors do. Is that something you could provide some value for? Okay, so I'm going to talk us through what designing a value proposition looks like. So let me introduce you to Jeff. Jeff is an avid reader. He is also a lover of all things Caribbean and the beach, and this is where he chooses to spend his free time. And so before he goes on vacation, he borrows books or heads to the library or orders things off Amazon or goes to the local indie bookstore. And yeah, he's actually going to probably chew through all of these books during his vacation. And because this can be annoying, especially if you're flying from Atlanta down to, I don't know, let's say Puerto Rico or even further south, he's tried to read on his iPad before, but it's not great when you're outside. You get a lot of glare, etc. So Jeff has purchased a Kindle, and now he can read beachfront with the glare till his heart desires. Okay. So thinking about a value proposition, we begin to explain the functional and the emotional benefits that a solution would provide to a customer. So in looking at this example, we need to consider how the Kindle solves Jeff's problem and why Jeff might choose it over the competition, right? And so we have to think about competition in a broad sense in this case. So what would you suggest could be a value proposition for why someone like Jeff would invest in an e-reader, or excuse me, in a Kindle? You can drop it in the chat. What might be the emotional or functional benefit? What job does it solve for him? What problem does it address? Why would someone like Jeff invest in a Kindle? Okay, carrying books, easier to transport. Yep. So those are both benefits, right? Books are heavy, helps with his mobility. So yes, these are all good starting places for sort of the benefits that engaging with a Kindle would bring someone like Jeff. Oh, who is VLF3? So Valentina, I'm hoping I say that correctly. Valentina, I love what you typed in. You typed in freedom of choice. So what Valentina has done there is get to an underlying root motivating reason that someone would engage with a Kindle, right? The problems are like you mentioned, it allows you to travel with multiple books. Books are too heavy. It's easier to transport, right? Those are all the problems. What is his motivating reason is that he can read as much as he wants to. He has that freedom of choice while he's on vacation. So that's the hard part of the value proposition to get to with a group of customers, right? It's easy to sort of talk through what the functionality of the solution might be and what it can actually do for a customer segment, but we need to understand why. So for someone like Jeff, maybe it's that ability to choose to read whatever he wants, whenever he wants, right? Okay, thanks. Thanks for playing along. Okay, here's another one. So this is Farah. Farah is a working mom, and she has 2 small children, and so getting out of the house in the morning is a nightmare. And typically Farah grabs some kind of protein bar to go, and evidently she's what my daughter calls a Visco girl because she walks around with her hydro flask. But this is breakfast for Farah most mornings. And it's about as appetizing as it looks right there. I've had these Lara bars. You need to be ready to chew quite a bit. And then the hydro flask is really trendy and great, but if you don't get the lid on quite right, this is what happens to the back seat of your car or to your passenger seat. And so Farah has taken to stopping on the way to drop her kids at childcare or right after childcare on her way to work and getting one of these fruit smoothies from McDonald's. So if we think about the functional and emotional benefits of this solution for Farah, consider how a fast food smoothie solves her problems and why she might choose it over the competition. And what could the competition be? Let's think about that first. What could the competition be for this solution? Just drop it in chat if you think of something, or you can unmute if you'd like. So the chewy Lara bar and the leaking hydro flask aren't cutting it. What's some other competition? Any thoughts? A Panera smoothie, okay. Any other thoughts? Yep, microwavable meal to heat up at work, like that. Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's think about this. Working moms will stop and buy a smoothie for breakfast because, what do we think the value is for Farah? What could we suggest here? So whether she gets it from McDonald's or Panera, okay, it's convenient. Jessica's throwing in that it's healthy, right? Because remember her breakfast before was one of those yucky Lara bars, which I think has like 0, it's full of, you just add dates and nuts, right? You add dates and nuts and smush them together and get a granola bar type thing. I think that's what that is. Why does convenience matter if we were to dig into that? What does help matter to Farah? time. So you'll see as you begin to think about those first benefits that you might be able to offer to a customer through a solution, more than likely when we're working with teams, we'll say, well, why is convenience important? Why is health important? Why is location important, right? What really is in it for them? What is the bigger problem that they're trying to solve? Has anybody heard the milkshake story or gone through it? What is that called, Sarah? It's the milkshake method or milkshake. Is that ringing a bell?
Are you talking about for the sort of jobs to be done stuff?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that it's a jobs to be done example.
Okay.
In my mind.
I'll go and, do you think you could find that and post it in chat, Sarah, so people can go look at it later? So it's this interesting example story of the job that a milkshake does for a customer, right? And there's sort of those surface level understandings we have of what job it's getting done. But as you dig into the layers, there's a little bit more to it in terms of the behavior behind people and why they choose the solution that they do, in this instance, a milkshake. So Sarah will find that posted in chat for you because it's fascinating to go and read. Let me talk you through things, and I've used these some of these terms. But first of all, I'll tell you that a value proposition is not an elevator pitch, right? It is not something that would necessarily be outward facing. It is not something that you would go and pitch to an investor at some point. It's not necessarily formulaic. A value proposition is not a marketing tagline. Yeah. Can anybody quickly identify what some of these taglines are for these companies without Googling it? Does anybody know any off the top of their head? No? Run like Duncan. Yeah, America runs on Duncan, right? Because you're worth it, L'Oreal. Yep. No worries, Valentina. You can just type in chat. Dollar Shave Club is shave time, shave money. Apple is think different. Coke, open happiness. Lay's, bet you can't eat just one. So these are also not value propositions. It's also not a mission statement, right? It's not all butterflies and rainbows. To help all people live healthy lives. To be the best in the eyes of our customers, employees, and shareholders. Right? This value proposition needs to be useful to you. And these are not very useful in terms of understanding the motivating behavior behind someone to engage with your solution. And it's not a feature or benefit. You heard me use that term quite a bit while we were going through the examples. So let me just pause for a second and let's go through. I'm going to show you a list of descriptors of various different solutions. And I'd like for you to tell me if we've hit on value propositions. These are not connected in any way. So let's say that one solution might only weigh 2.5 pounds, and then another solution might be made using flax, or that another solution, the value is that it's only $2.35 a gallon. What do you think these might be? Are they value propositions? Are they something else? They're not value propositions. They're features. Yes, Vanessa. Yeah. Yeah, you said a value proposition is not a feature set, so this is not. Yes, thank you, Ray. Yep. Okay, so let's take it down a level. So instead of saying that something's 2.5 pounds, we're going to say that it's lightweight. Or instead of suggesting that the reason our customer is going to engage with something is that it has a titanium case, we're going to say, well, what we mean by that is that it's rugged. Have we hit on value propositions yet? No, Jessica, do you know what they are? You're right. They're not value propositions yet. Do you know what they are? Yes, they're benefits. These are the benefits. So if we look at then what the features and benefits, how that might transition into a value proposition for a customer. So We said it's only 2.5 pounds, is lightweight. What does this mean for our customer? Less back pain. We've said that it's made out of titanium, which the benefit of it is rugged. Value proposition is not going to break when I drop it or when my toddler drops it, right? Biodegradable, we've said, what about the fact that it's made from flax, which the benefit is it's biodegradable? Well, the value proposition to a customer might be that it is an environmentally savvy or trendy or right thing to do. And they might be motivated by that. 0 to 60 in 2 seconds, not just as fast, it's fun to drive, right? Or it looks really cool, or people are impressed because it sits in my driveway. What is the motivating reason behind someone engaging with your solution? For Ray's asking, for B2B, would increase your revenue by getting you access to an untapped demographic could be a value proposition. Yes, however, that would need to map directly to a specific customer, right? So who within that business, or what group of people, or what division within that business has a problem and cannot engage with an untapped demographic at this point, and are also motivated by revenue generation, right? So then you'd have to understand, how much more revenue do I have to generate, and can I actually get them access to the one or the multiple untapped demographic they're trying to engage with? So it will become it will pare down some from that. Will not be as general as revenue and untapped demographics. Add some more specificity to it. And so when you get into, so this is a great transition, Ray, because when you get into a value proposition that feels more business related, right? Like you'll lower risk, you'll save time, you'll save money. Well, Sarah and I will say, great. By how much risk do you have to lower it, right? How much money do you have to either make them or save them for them to stop whatever they're doing now, invest in your solution, engage with your solution? Perhaps there's some kind of training involved, right? Perhaps there's some kind of learning curve. What is the threshold for them? If you were going to offer them quality, to what extent, right? What about their current solution is not meeting their quality standards? And so how do you need to provide something that has better quality to them? So there's even more nuance to each of these sort of business related value propositions. And the same with emotional, right? It's not that I'm just going to make you, not that my solution is going to make you healthier, but I'm going to help you drop your cholesterol by 15 points. I don't even know if that's healthy or safe, so I'm not in medicine. Is it okay to drop your cholesterol by 15 points? Does anybody know? I don't know. Sarah doesn't know either. Okay, cool. If it is going to give them better usability, right? What does that actually mean? What can't they do right now, and what do they need to be able to do? So there's a lot more nuance and specificity that goes into these value propositions. And in a lot of these, you can chart them to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Welcome to Psychology 101. It might have been years since you've taken a psychology class. But a lot of ways you can map your value propositions to this hierarchy of needs. For example, this value proposition of less back pain, where on the pyramid might this fall? Any thoughts? Safety. Yep. Security of body. Absolutely. What about the idea that something is environmentally progressive, right? I'm only going to wear clothes made from flaxseed because then they're biodegradable when I'm done with them. So my value proposition is that all of my clothing in my closet is environmentally progressive. Where does that fall on Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Esteem, confidence, respect of others. Absolutely. So this is another way to think of it when you are really trying to drill down into the true motivating behavior for someone. You can see if it actually begins to map to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Self-actualization. Yeah, I would probably put environmentally progressive could go in esteem, or self-actualization 2 based on sort of the feedback you're getting from your customer. So really, when we're talking to customers and we're trying to identify who are our top customer segments, we want to know who they are, why do they make the buying or adopting or purchasing or deployment decisions that they do. And here's something that's really important to remember. For this methodology, customers are people 100% of the time, right? They're not hospitals, they're not businesses, they're not car dealerships, they're not pharmaceutical companies, they're people, right? So within each of those organizations that I just listed, there is a person or a group of people that has the problem or the pain point that you need to address. So we are going to engage with those people, and it's anyone in the ecosystem to whom you deliver value. So this is really critical, but especially at the national level, when you're asked to get 100 interviews, teams will say to us, well, we really think that we are going to sell this to, or this is going to be a technology that's going to be used by orthopedic surgeons. And it's unrealistic to think they are going to talk to 100 orthopedic surgeons, and they don't need to, right? They need to understand the fuller ecosystem. So who else in that ecosystem might gain value by the orthopedic surgeons engaging with a new surgical tool? Well, perhaps it's the nurses. Perhaps it's someone in post-operative care. Perhaps it is someone in hospital admissions because this tool helps reinfection rate go down, right? Perhaps it's someone in purchasing because the tool is more cost efficient, right? Patients, yes, patients will receive value from this. So depending on your ecosystem, it will depend on whether you need to talk to the patients or not, right? Do patients have any kind of say in what instruments are used during a surgical procedure? Well, I can make some assumptions, but right, those are the things that we have to understand about the ecosystem. That might look very different if you're creating a tool for physical therapists to use, right? The patient might have a little bit more interaction and a little bit more say-so in what's used during those sessions. So it's not just the people that are going to write you the check. And this methodology is all about people. And we have to remember that they don't act alone, right? They are influenced negatively and positively by those around them that they engage with in their ecosystem. And we have to understand how all of those dynamics work so that we can fully understand the ecosystem and make sure that we are delivering the right kind of value to the right group of people. So let me talk you through what some of these customer types might look like. And this, you won't necessarily have all of these customer types in your ecosystem, but you have whoever's going to be the decision maker, right? Whoever decides, hey, we really need to engage with this new solution. That could be someone who is different from the one who is actually going to write the check, right? So perhaps you need to understand and be able to articulate the value to the purchaser, the economic buyer, differently than you do the decision maker. You're going to have someone who influences these decisions. And on the other hand, you'll have someone who sabotages new projects, right? Perhaps you put a group of people, perhaps your new technology is going to put a group of people out of work or significantly reduce the number of hours they need to work. You got to know who those people are, right? So they don't take you by surprise and sabotage your project when you're pretty far down the road. End user is different than, I don't think I have it on this list, but oops, sorry. Geez, stop, okay. Then a beneficiary, right? Let's think, going back to the orthopedic surgeon example, the beneficiary in a lot of ways could be the patient, but not necessarily, they're not necessarily the end user. So you need to understand people's roles in the ecosystem and understand how they influence each other. How do we figure this out? I know you're going to be shocked, and you're going to be really shocked, but it comes back to customer discovery. Engaging with those customers, engaging with the people in the ecosystem, finding out what their problems are, how they're addressing them now, how those solutions are working for them, and can you come in and innovate something that will better address the problem or the pain point or help them make the gain that they need to. So there we go. that is value propositions. And I think we are close to time. Sarah, do you want me to get into funding opportunities at all? Or yeah, you do?
Yeah, definitely
Okay.
want to hear about the funding opportunities and the engagement opportunities for this group.
So I'm going to address Vanessa's question first. How do you develop a better understanding of the nuances for each value proposition? Okay, will you then answer your question, which I love? Will this knowledge emerge from the interview's customer discovery phase? Yes, absolutely it will. As you dig in with each customer group and figure out what really motivates them, what's holding them back, how they've engaged with new solutions in the past, how they make those adoption decisions or those purchasing decisions, you'll begin to understand really what is going to be the motivating factor for each group of people that you need to provide value to. What other questions can I answer? Feel free to drop more in chat. Or you can unmute, that's fine too.
Hey, so do we interview everyone in the ecosystem, or should we only save time, or should we only use our time to interview our customer?
So you will have multiple customer segments, right? Because you will have multiple people who will in some capacity be impacted by or engaging with what your final solution is. And so you want to talk to, off the bat, you want to talk to the key players in that. You want to talk to the people who are going to benefit and or who are going to be using it and or who are going to be paying for it, right? To really begin to understand of the key people that I think will be engaging with the solution. Do their problems, do their pain points exist the way in which I think they do? And then if you start to answer yes to all of your assumptions about them, right? Then you begin to expand your ecosystem out a little bit, and you make sure that you're talking to all the other players in the ecosystem as well. So if you think about putting your solution into a workflow, who is that going to impact? Who might engage with it? And for what reason? You need to have an understanding of how all those people function and how your solution coming into their workflow will positively and negatively impact them. And you do that through conversations. So initially you might keep your customer segment group that you're talking to smaller, right? Like maybe 2 or 3 groups of people in that ecosystem that you're talking to. And as you determine that, yes, you could really deliver value to that smaller group of people, then you expand it out to all the players that you would need to have conversations with so that you don't miss something in the ecosystem. Sorry, I couldn't tell who asked that, and I'm happy to entertain a follow-up from you. Okay, then I'm going to move on to Vanessa's question. Do you do 100+ interviews with each customer type? No, you do not. And this is another question that we get too, like, well, how many should I do with the end user versus how many should I do with the beneficiary versus how many should I do, right? And the answer is there's not a set number. And so when you start having conversations with folks, you will begin to, and once your customer discovery takes a little bit of practice, and usually most of us are bad at it at first, right? We bias the conversations, we slip into talking about our solution, we forget to ask open-ended questions, so we're not getting, the conversation's not really rolling, right? Once you start to get better at it and you start to have a list of questions that you really know are going to get the conversation generated, when you start to hear the same thing over and over again from the same group of people, you know, okay, we've really sort of hit all that, we can move on. And for some teams, that might be 10 interviews with the same type of customer, right? So customer segment. For some teams, that might be 20 interviews, right? But you will sort of have a gut feel, hey, at this point, I've talked to 10 to 12, 10 or 11 orthopedic surgeons, and I'm hearing really the same thing from them in terms of their difficulties surrounding this technology, right? Or this problem that they're facing. So you might walk away feeling like, I don't think we need to entertain conversations with any more orthopedic surgeons because they're really telling us the same thing. We're going to move on and talk to we're going to go and talk to the hospital administrators, the ones that are in charge of hospital readmissions and infection rates, right? And so then you start to talk to 5 or 6 or 7 of those, and start to see, are you starting to hear the same thing again? Are you starting to really understand sort of an overarching idea of what they struggle with and what their job requires of them, right? Both the things that are understood that would be on some kind of job description and the things that are more nuanced that you can only understand from having conversations with them. So it's going to be 100 plus people in the ecosystem, not each customer segment. Does that help, Vanessa? All right, any other questions out there? Sure, no problem. All right, so let me take you through real quick some funding opportunities that are available to you. There's something called the Georgia Research Alliance, and we've got actually someone who works with us in VentureLab, someone on the Create side, Jonathan Goldman, has a joint appointment with VentureLab and the Georgia Research Alliance, and this is a great non-diluted funding opportunity for teams that are really trying to do some initial discovery, some initial prototyping, and so this is for Georgia Tech, State of Georgia, university-based research projects that are happening. Highly recommend, if you fall into that category, to learn a little bit more about Georgia Research Alliance and ask us to connect you with Jonathan Goldman. We'd be happy to. So I'm not going to, we don't have a lot of time, I'm not going to go through the history of Georgia Research Alliance, but just know that their mission is to propel new companies out of university research. And these are the universities that they have engagements with. And Georgia Tech, also because they're based in Midtown and we're based in Midtown, we have a great working relationship with them. So this gives you an idea of how much funding you can get from them. And it's usually like phase 2 is built off of the work you did in phase 1, phase 3 built off phase 2, etc. And it's a really great way to grow and augment your project without giving away a lot of your equity. We will also share this deck with you so that you can study this more fully. If you haven't heard about it, there's a seed fund agency called SBIR, STTR, and this is another great non-diluted funding resource for university teams, though you don't have to be a university team. So if we have any teams that are not necessarily under the umbrella of a research university, but you're working on some kind of technology project, you could be applicable for this as well. And they do a really nice job with their programming as well. We also have an SBIR expert on campus, Connie Castile, and I'm happy to introduce you to Connie as well if this is something that could work for your project. This is the NSF program, I-Corps program that Sarah and I have mentioned a couple of times this morning. The SITES grant is specifically for Georgia Tech research teams. You can receive up to $3,000 to begin your customer discovery exploration. I run this program, and so if you're interested and you send an application, you're sending it to me. So would love for those of you who need some money to begin your customer discovery research to submit an application. I'd love to take a look at it. If you do, just somewhere on there, acknowledge that you are a part of this GYM workshop, just to trigger my memory, please. And then the SITES program is a feeder program into the I-Corps teams, the 7-week boot camp where research teams get up to $50,000 to really dig into customer discovery and perhaps go visit customers in places that they wouldn't necessarily have the funds to travel to ordinarily, and a little bit of that money could be used for some prototyping and development. So how you can engage with us further. We have our I-Corps South programs. We have regional programs that you can engage with. We have female founder programs for you to be able to engage with. This will give you some more information about the SITES program. So take a look at this when we share the deck in a little bit. Here's Female Founders. Sarah and I started this last fall, and this is for teams who are have a female founder or co-founded by a woman, or someone who identifies as a woman. And we wanted to give you an opportunity to be surrounded with like-minded women who were also going through technology research projects and attempting to commercialize them and build your network, specifically here in Atlanta, your network of other successful entrepreneurs, of investors, etc. That's a really fun program for those of you who would qualify. Innovation Open Mic, this is another program we can get you attached to if you just want to practice pitching, or if you'd like to get some feedback from some seasoned startup mentors. This is not happening this summer, but it'll kick off again in August. It's a great place to go. It's all virtual right now. You would just go pitch your project, your idea, and get some feedback on customer discovery efforts you should be taking, or ways to better dig into what your value proposition might be, etc. Okay, so I saw a couple things happening in chat.
Melissa, I was mostly just giving people our resources and emails and stuff like that, so they could reach out to us. Yeah.
All right, cool. So this has been, I feel like you've been drinking from a fire hose this morning. We've thrown a lot of information at you, and I just breezed through that last section. So please feel free to follow up with us. Yes, I see the question in chat. These opportunities are open to undergraduate students. And so we like to engage with everyone that we can. What other questions can I answer for you?
If there are any other questions, guys, feel free to jump off mute and ask them. We'll stick around for a few more minutes. But if you don't have any right now, or you want to follow up later, I've dropped the emails into chat. Also provided you with our websites where we have more information on the iCourse Sites program and how to apply. And we have more information on our iCourse South website on a number of different programs that we're going to be hosting in the near term. And we'll continue to put updates on when programs are happening on that website. But seriously, we definitely want you to reach out to us. So if you don't have questions right now, please email us. We'd love to chat with you, schedule some time for a phone call, talk about your concept or where you are in your journey to becoming an entrepreneur, and we can talk about the best place for you to plug in. All right, y'all.
One of the slides.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I can put it in the. I was just going to say one of the slides. One of the slides said iCore site, and then beneath it said iCore teams for 50K and wanting to do customer discovery. What's the difference between those two? Yeah, that one. What's the difference between site and teams?
So Sites is a local program that we run through Georgia Tech, and it is self-driven, and teams submit a budget, say what they need to do their customer discovery for. I and a few others review it, and if you're approved, you receive funding to do some travel, to attend trade shows, to take a look at a conference, perhaps to buy some books or other resources you might need to help you better perform the Lean Startup methodology. And then the iCore Teams program is run by the National Science Foundation. That is it has a lot more requirements in terms of the makeup of your team, the technology level readiness of your project, and the time commitment is 7 weeks, and it's very scripted, and it comes with $50,000 to supercharge your customer discovery efforts.
Got it. Thanks.
Sure.
Any other questions, guys? You're very welcome, Vanessa. If there are no other questions, y'all, we can close out for today. But if you, like I said, we'll stay on the phone call if you just want to ask us something one-on-one, and definitely encourage you guys to shoot us a note.